Ever notice how some guys just seem different after being single for a while? Not bitter, not desperate, just calm, grounded. Like they've figured something out that most of us are still chasing. What if I told you that the longer a man walks alone, the more he unknowingly begins to practice one of the most powerful philosophies in human history, one that emperors used to govern empires and prisoners used to survive captivity. I'm talking about Stoicism. And no, I didn't come across it flipping through a philosophy textbook. I discovered it the hard way, through years of solitude, confusion, emotional recovery, and ultimately, clarity. And this is the story of how extended singlehood can turn an ordinary man into an accidental Stoic philosopher, whether he realizes it or not. It starts, like many of our stories do, with a breakup. Not the kind where you cry for a week and then move on. I'm talking about the kind of breakup that leaves you gutted, the kind where you don't even recognize yourself for a while. For me, it was 3 years ago. It felt like a nuclear blast went off in my life. And for months, maybe longer, I was picking emotional shrapnel out of my soul. So I did what most of us do. I jumped into dating apps. I met people for coffee that tasted like disappointment. I had those brief flickers of hope that flared up and died faster than a cheap match. I smiled, made conversation, tried to feel something, but deep down, I was just going through the motions. And then came the moment that changed everything. I was sitting across from someone perfectly nice, perfectly attractive, and all I could think was, why am I here? What am I even doing this for? That question didn't feel bitter. It felt honest. And that honesty led to something unexpected. I didn't get more desperate. I got calmer. Not numb, clear. I became more selective. Not because my standards were impossibly high, but because I stopped lying to myself about what I really wanted. Here's what no one tells you. When you're single long enough, you start to see the difference between what you truly desire and what you've been conditioned to want. Society tells us we need the relationship, the timeline, the couple selfies, the engagement announcement, the house, the ring. But after a while, all that pressure starts to feel like noise, background static. And that's when I stumbled into Stoicism. Without even knowing it, I was living it. The ancient Stoics believed in separating what you can control from what you cannot. They called everything outside your control externals. Things like wealth, reputation, health, and yes, even relationships. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what started happening. The less I tried to control love, the more peace I found within myself. And here's the part that really messes with your head: the paradox of indifference. The moment you stop desperately needing a relationship is exactly the moment you become most capable of having a healthy one. The Stoics had a concept for this called preferred indifference. It means that some things are nice to have, like good health, financial stability, or love, but your happiness shouldn't depend on them. After year 4 of being single, I stopped performing. I stopped treating every new date like an audition. Conversations became real. Vulnerability replaced charm. Honesty replaced strategy. And most of all, I stopped feeling like my worth depended on whether someone chose me. That illusion shattered. My value wasn't up for negotiation anymore. I still remember the exact moment it all clicked. I was on a date with someone incredible. Beautiful, intelligent, successful. A person who years earlier I would have tried hard to impress. But this time, I wasn't thinking about what to say next. I wasn't rehearsing lines in my head. I was just present, calm, at peace. And I thought to myself, she's amazing. But if this doesn't work out, my life is still excellent. That thought would have terrified the old me. But the man I had become, he felt free. That's the Stoic principle of apatheia. Not apathy, not indifference in the cold sense, but emotional independence. It's the ability to experience joy without being ruled by desire, and to experience pain without being ruled by fear. And here's what really matters. Once you've felt that kind of inner peace, everything changes. You no longer chase people to fill a void. You build a life so full, so rich, that anyone who enters it is a bonus, not a necessity. You're not bitter, jaded, or emotionally unavailable. You're simply not performing anymore. You don't fear loneliness because you've learned how to enjoy your own company. And ironically, that's when people are most drawn to you, not because you're trying to attract them, but because you're finally whole. So if you're single and you're starting to question your path, don't panic. Don't rush. You're not behind. You might just be walking a different road, one that doesn't lead away from love, but towards something deeper. You might be becoming an accidental stoic, and in a world that constantly tries to sell you validation and distraction, that's a rare kind of freedom. They say indifference is a form of apathy, but that's not what this is. That's not indifference. That's freedom. And it changes everything. But like all deep and lasting freedoms, this one comes with an unexpected cost. I call it the fortress and the bridge. The longer a man stays single, especially in a conscious, intentional way, the more he begins to construct what I call a stoic fortress. This isn't about loneliness or escapism. It's about building a self-contained world where you rely on no one and nothing beyond yourself to feel fulfilled. The daily routine becomes perfected. Personal finances are dialed in. Emotional regulation becomes second nature. Living space becomes a reflection of exactly how he wants to live without compromise. This man becomes the architect of his own peace. The ancient Stoic Epictetus was on to something profound when he said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." That's what this fortress is, a place where you use what's within your control and let the rest pass like weather. It's a powerful way to live. It breeds calm, strength, clarity. But here's where it gets complicated. The very walls that keep the noise out also keep connection out. Because building a fortress is one thing, building a bridge is another. I think of my friend Michael. He was 42, single, for almost a decade. His life was elegant in its simplicity and strength. Beautiful apartment, thriving career, meaningful friendships, travel at will. He had it all figured out. He was what the Stoics would call a man living in eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue, discipline, and wisdom. And then he met Sarah. At first, it was perfect. She was warm, spontaneous, kind. She brought something different, a gentle energy, a bit of unpredictability. But over time, the small suggestions started. She wanted to move their weekly date night to better fit her work schedule. She had ideas about how they might combine or rethink finances. She asked for more unstructured time on weekends, not unreasonable requests, not controlling, not selfish, just natural things that happen when two people try to share a life. But Michael froze. The fortress walls rose. Every change felt like an intrusion. Not because he didn't care for her, but because his life had become so finely tuned that any disruption felt like a threat. And that's the irony. The self-sufficiency that made him such a strong, grounded person was the very thing that made partnership feel like sacrifice instead of growth. Seneca once said, "He who clings to a rock cannot move forward." Michael was clinging to his routine, his autonomy, his fortress. And in doing so, he risked missing out on the one thing he didn't realize he still needed: integration. Because real strength isn't just in solitude, it's in balance, in learning how to remain yourself while making space for someone else. This is what I call the advanced class in Stoicism. It's no longer about withdrawal from the world. It's about learning how to share your world with another without collapsing your foundation. That's not easy. When you've lived 5, 10, 15 years building yourself up, the idea of bending feels like breaking. But it's not. It's adapting. It's evolution. And it's necessary. Which brings me to the deepest shift of all, the mortality perspective. The Stoics practiced an exercise called memento mori. Remember you will die. It sounds morbid at first, but it's actually liberating. When you keep death in mind, you stop wasting time on petty arguments, pride, and illusions of permanence. You start asking better questions. And after 5 years of being on my own, I had a moment that changed everything. I was visiting my grandfather in hospice care. We sat in silence for a long time, just holding hands. And I realized something in that quiet. He wasn't thinking about his job, his routines, his home, or his achievements. He was thinking about people, about love, about connection, about moments where he felt seen and known and close to someone else. That hit me like a wave. Because in that moment, I realized what all of this was for. The fortress, the freedom, the discipline. It's not about needing nothing. It's about learning to choose connection, not from lack, not from fear, but from abundance. The Stoic ideal isn't isolation, it's sovereignty. And with that sovereignty, we gain the power to choose love, to choose vulnerability, to choose to build a bridge, not because we have to, but because we can. That's the transformation. That's the paradox. You spend years learning how to be enough for yourself. And once you truly are, the real growth begins. Learning how to let someone else in, without losing yourself, without shutting down, without clinging to the rock. Because in the end, no matter how strong your fortress is, it's the bridges you build that give your life depth. And someday, when you're sitting in silence with only your memories left, it won't be your routines you think about. It'll be the people you let in, the moments you shared, the love you allowed. That's the real Stoic journey. That's what I'm still learning every day. This mortality perspective strips away the trivial concerns that plague early dating. What will my friends think of her? Is she impressive enough on paper? Do we look good together in photos? Instead, it focuses you on what matters. Does this person help me become my best self? Do we face life's challenges as worthy allies? Can we create meaning together? I started asking different questions on dates, not the usual resume exchange, but things like, what gives your life meaning? And what's something you've changed your mind about recently? Questions that reveal character, values, and wisdom, what the Stoics would call the only true goods. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. The longer a man stays single while developing his inner world, the clearer his thoughts become about what partnership truly means. The paradoxical preparation. Here's the ultimate irony and the secret I promised to share with you at the beginning. The longer a man practices this accidental stoicism of singlehood, the more prepared he becomes for a relationship of extraordinary depth. Not just any relationship, not the kind based on neediness or completing each other or escaping loneliness. Something rarer. A partnership of two whole people who choose each other daily with eyes wide open. I call it the paradoxical preparation. By mastering the art of not needing a relationship, you become capable of having one that's actually worth having. When you've learned to manage emotions rather than be ruled by them. When you've distinguished between what you can and cannot control. When you've built a life of meaning on your own terms, you enter relationships differently. You bring clarity instead of confusion, purpose instead of need, stability instead of chaos. Anthropologist Margaret Mead once said something fascinating about this. When asked about the earliest sign of civilization, she didn't point to tools or weapons. She pointed to a healed femur, a thigh bone that had broken and mended. In the animal kingdom, she explained, if you break your leg, you die. You can't run from danger, hunt for food, or reach water. But a healed femur showed someone had cared for the injured person until they recovered. That's what evolved relationships look like. Two people who don't need each other to survive, but choose to help each other thrive. The accidental Stoic doesn't enter relationships to escape suffering, but to create meaning alongside another sovereign individual. As Epictetus said, he is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Are you accidentally practicing Stoicism in your single life? Or have you found other philosophies that guide you? Subscribe for more explorations of modern manhood through ancient wisdom. And remember, as the Stoics would say, the obstacle is the way.